Hey there guys, welcome back to the Modern JavaScript Crash course, lesson 18. In this lesson we're going to be carrying on taking a look at JavaScript loops, and this lesson we'll look at the while loop and the do while loop. As always guys, if you like the content, please show your support by hitting that like button, and if you're new here and like to learn about web development and web design, make sure to hit that subscribe button and choose all notifications so you never miss an update. Alright guys, so living in the shadow of the beloved for loop are the while and do while loop variants. And these loop variants are probably the simplest looping statements provided by JavaScript. So the first loop we'll take a look at is the while loop. So the syntax of the while loop has a few differences compared to the for loop. So the first difference we have with the while loop compared to the for loop is that our initializer, or our variable, is not within the parameters of our keyword like it was in the previous lesson. So the first thing we do when we're writing out a while loop is first writing out our variable. So we're just going to say let I, which again is a bit of a convention and is meant to represent index, but again you can name this variable anything you want, but we'll stick with the I, and this is just going to equal 1, so we'll keep it the same as we did in our previous lesson. Now after our variable we'll go on to our next line and we'll grab the while keyword followed by the parentheses. Now inside the parentheses we insert our condition, so we're just going to say I is less than or equal to 5, followed by the curly braces, and then we write out our code statement, which again is just going to be what we did in the last lesson. So I'm just going to put console log, and we're going to grab our variable, so we'll use backticks here, and we'll grab the variable of I, and we'll do that with the $, curly braces I, followed by the string of I love JavaScript. And then after the code statement is when we insert our final expression, or our incrementer in this case, like the previous example. So we say I plus plus, and as you can see we're getting the exact same output as we did in the previous lesson, where we loop through this statement 5 times using the while loop. And just to show you guys how this is working behind the scenes, I'm just going to paste the comment format of how this is working like I did in the previous lesson. So as you can see how this is working behind the scenes, so we have our first iteration and the variable starts at 1, so our first iteration is 1. Is 1 less than 5, which we've set in our condition. This is true. Again, if this is true, I gets increased to the second iteration, which in this example is 2, until it gets to the 6th iteration. 6 is larger than 5, which means our statement here is false, hence why the loop gets terminated. So the main difference here between the while loop and the for loop is that only the condition is within the parameters of the while loop. The variable here, as you can see, is placed outside, and the final expression is actually within the curly braces after the code statement that's meant to run if it's true. So now let's take a look at the do while loop. So I'm just going to get rid of all this stuff here, and we'll go underneath this comment. Now where the while loop has its conditional expression first before the loop executes, the do while loop actually has its conditional expression at the end. So the do while loop looks a little something like this. So first we have our variable, or our initializer, so I'm just going to copy this out so it doesn't get in the way. And then first we have the do keyword, in which we insert our statement, so we're going to insert this statement, paste that in there, and then we have our incrementer, so I plus plus, and then we have our conditional expression, so we say while, then parentheses, which houses our condition, so we say I is less than or equal to 5, and we close that off. And as you can see now we're getting the exact same output as we did with our while loop here. Now you may be wondering what the main difference between the two is. Well, the main difference between a while loop and a do while loop is that the contents of a while loop here never get executed if the conditional expression is false from the very beginning, whereas with a do while loop here, because the conditional expression is evaluated at the end, the loop is actually guaranteed to at least run once. So that's the main difference between the while loop and the do while loop. So now we know a few JavaScript loops, there are a few things to note here. The first thing is that you should always make sure that the condition specified in your loop eventually goes to false, otherwise the loop will never stop iterating, which is known as an infinite loop. And a common mistake is that a lot of people actually forget to include the final expression, or the increment counter. Now you may also be wondering which loop to choose from, bearing in mind that there are still 2 more loops to look at. Now, as I mentioned, the for loop is predominantly used when we know how many times we want something to iterate. So for example, if we created a game and we only want something to strictly run 5 times, you would use the for loop. Whereas with a while loop and a do while loop, this isn't the case. If we needed some code to run, so let's just say user input, we may not be sure how many times we may need it to run. So in that case, you'd use something like a while loop or a do while loop. So those are just a few things to keep in mind. So to quickly summarize this lesson, a while loop and a do while loop differ from a for loop. The condition is the only thing that's within the parameters for each keyword. The initializer is inserted first, whereas the final expression, this is inserted inside the curly braces along with a code statement that we want to run. Now the two do differ slightly in where the while loop has its conditional expression first, the do while loop has its conditional expression at the end, which results in the do while loop's contents guaranteed to run at least once, even if the condition is false. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. If you like the content, please hit the like button, and if you guys are new here, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next video.